Shri Nitin Gadkari ji, Tun Sami Velu, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to all of you. In the interest of time, and I know the Minister has to leave soon, I want to keep my comments brief, but also to focus it on what I think are important areas where we can work together between India and ASEAN. Let me start by congratulating the Indian High Commissioner, Mr. Jawad Ashraf, His Excellency, and his team who have put together this outstanding event, which response has been phenomenal. I want to congratulate you, and I know the attention to detail that's been put into it. Please join me in congratulating them. Secondly, I also want to extend a warm welcome to all the delegates, including our business associates and partners from India and the ASEAN who have come here. And I think your presence here, and the strong presence, is an indication of your recognition of the opportunities that present themselves through the cooperation between India and ASEAN. I want to make a few simple comments. The first is the opportunity for collaboration and partnership between India and ASEAN is, I think, self-evident. Both regions have strong growth. They're coming out of relatively modest base, but anchored by fundamentals, whether it's in terms of demographics, whether in terms of the evolution of the economy and the needs of the population. What we see is an opportunity for continued investment and growth in both regions. Equally, both regions, whilst they are integrated markets, they are by no means monolithic or homogeneous. India is one country, but each state in India in itself presents significant variations. And that is an opportunity as much as it is a challenge, because it means for those who invest their time and effort in developing a deeper understanding of the market and its nuances and variations are the ones to whom the rewards will be greatest. Similarly, in ASEAN, we have the ASEAN Economic Community, an integrated effort to bring together ASEAN as one seamless market. And even as we go about this effort, which has gathered significant momentum in recent times, the important point to recognize also is to understand the relative strengths and the opportunities that reside within the different ASEAN member states and how we can go about participating in those and contributing to their growth. I thought there are a few key areas where we can focus our energies in order to achieve significant outcomes. And I thought I'd highlight a few sectors. The first is obviously in the area of infrastructure. I think it's appropriate that Mr. Nitin Gadkari is here, given India's ambitious and significant plans and operations underway to enhance its infrastructure. This cuts across whether it's roads, rail, ports, airports, etc. We have a similar need in ASEAN as well, and the needs in terms of not just the infrastructure, but also in terms of how the projects are structured and how they are financed is going to be an important part of the evolution of the infrastructure sector in our parts of the world. This is why Singapore has invested significant effort in creating an infrastructure office in order to facilitate the structuring of bankable, sound infrastructure projects backed by capabilities, not just in terms of legal and finance, but also in terms of engineering, in order to execute these large-scale projects across diverse infrastructure project requirements, whether it's in power, in water, in roads, and ports and airports. So I think this is an area of focus, and in particular within infrastructure, smart cities, which is an area of priority for the Indian government as articulated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I think it's an important area where ASEAN businessmen and companies can participate in. Singapore itself is involved in several of these, the most notable of which is, of course, the Amravati project. But I think that stands as an example of what we can do together. But there is a range of opportunities, differing needs across India and equally across ASEAN. And I think this is an area where we need to pool our capabilities. There are strong infrastructure companies in India. There are strong infrastructure companies in ASEAN. And how we can collectively work together to pursue some of these opportunities, be they industrial parks in Indonesia or townships or smart city developments in India. These are things that we should be looking at actively. The second area I would highlight is in startups and innovation. Both India and ASEAN have emphasized innovation in the startup ecosystem. And this is because in the evolution of industries and sectors that we see today, across all verticals, the disruption factor is high, and the potential, therefore, for new players to come in is significant. But the interesting thing about startups also is their need to be connected globally, or at least regionally, from the get-go. So these days, we don't look at startups as companies that reach a certain scale in the domestic market before they venture overseas. Indeed, many of them are already looking for opportunities to connect with other markets early in their development. So this is an area, because India has identified startups and innovation and investment in this as a major priority. And we are doing this in Singapore as well, and also in the context of ASEAN. Many of our ASEAN member states have prioritized this. So I think this is an area we should be looking at to see how we can build the connectivity in order to achieve mutual benefit and growth. A second area I would highlight is in the digital economy and e-commerce. Singapore assumes the chairmanship of ASEAN this year. We're emphasizing resilience and innovation as the themes, and an important anchor in the effort that Singapore is undertaking with our ASEAN partners is in the space of electronic commerce and the digital economy. Why is this important? Not just because it is a fad or a fashion that's cutting across. Most importantly, it creates opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises to now access markets that were well beyond their reach previously. They're able to reach out into the furthest markets through digital connectivity, and that means it is an opportunity to unleash the potential of a whole segment of our enterprise ecosystem. And I think this is an area that all of us share as a common priority, and it is an area where in ASEAN we want to ensure the enabling environment is there for our enterprises to participate actively in the digital economy. The final point I would make is, in the ASEAN context, is beyond the digital economy and innovation, we want to ensure a larger enabling environment for services and for activities that are supported around services. So an ASEAN agreement on trade and services is an area of importance, and priorities being accorded to that as well as part of workstream. I can highlight many other areas that we want to emphasize, but the key thing I wanted to conclude with is this. In ASEAN, there is a clear impetus to integrate the market further in order to meet the needs of our people and realize the potential of our economies. In India, that effort is equally underway under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, and we are seeing the results. Both economic entities have got significant growth potential, and indeed, the center of gravity in terms of global growth has moved to Asia largely because of the Indian, ASEAN, and Chinese growth aspects. So we have now a unique opportunity to pool our resources. I think it's fitting that this event is taking place in Singapore. Singapore has had strong historical connections with India and, of course, with our neighbors and our region in ASEAN. But at the same time, we also have functioned as a gateway for Indian businesses coming into ASEAN, for ASEAN businesses going into Asia. And this has been our traditional role, and that's reflected in the strong cohort of Indian and ASEAN businesses that are present here and incorporated in Singapore. So I think the potential is enormous. We need to focus our minds on specific areas or sectors where we can get the maximum outcomes. And I think that's where the opportunity is, so that we can build that connectivity between our economies, between our businesses, and between our people. Thank you very much.